everyone to Dark Kids Productions, The One Piece Crew. I'm Dr. Scott Jordan, aka Zombie Scotty, cognitive psychologist, philosopher at Illinois State University. And today we've gotten together to discuss episodes 3 and 4 of the amazing Netflix live-action adaptation, One Piece. Joining me on the crew is this amazing group of people you see in front of you. Please, we'll ask each of them to introduce themselves and what they do, and we'll start with Rio.
Hello, I'm Rio Shigeta, actor of many kinds, professor emeritus of anime studies at Usopp University, salesman by day and dungeon master by night. I kind of do a lot of everything. I may sound a little rough today, coming off of a bout of scurvy. It may be a poisoning by our cat. I don't know yet. But yeah, that's sort of where I'm at today. Tried to cosplay as Usopp and turned out more like Michael Scott. So we're going to roll with it.
Pirate by podcast as well there, right?
Yes,
right.
Correct.
Absolutely. How about you, Maisha?
Hi everyone, I'm Maisha. I am a cognitive and experimental and quantitative psychology dual sequence student at Illinois State University. I'm currently pursuing my master's and I call myself a self-proclaimed pop culture nerd. And yeah, I love everything about pop culture, and most importantly, I love anime, and One Piece is like one of my favorite. And today I'm really excited to talk about it with you, everyone.
Fantastic. How about you, Kristen?
Hi, I'm Kristen Farrell. I am an actor, pure art instructor, and realtor in the Chicagoland area.
Awesome. So look, Rio's the navigator, Maisha's the enforcer, Kristen's the chef.
I did not poison Rio.
What's that?
I said I did not poison Rio.
Well, that's a plot twist we'll come across in episode 3 or 4, right? I'm the pseudo captain, and I've asked Rio to fulfill his duties as navigator, and please take us through our adventures for the day.
Absolutely. So we've kind of plotted a course for the Grand Line. So far, we've started by following Luffy's journey, starting off by eating the Devil's Fruit and setting sail, meeting Kobe, finding the map for the Grand Line, winning it over from Captain Morgan, and also fighting it out of the hands of the deranged clown Buggy. So today, we are beyond that. Now the tenuous alliance that is Luffy and Nami and Zorro are headed to the nearest island because their ship has broken down. Happens to be the Gecko Islands. They land in Syrup Village, which is known for their shipwrighting, so it turns out. And one of the first characters that they meet there is Usopp. Usopp is sort of an interesting character. We get a flashback almost immediately of Usopp as a kid running around, knocking on all the doors, saying, "The pirates are coming, the pirates are coming." And then we sort of learn later on that, this is sort of an expression, I think, of an absent father, a recurring theme, I think, in the whole story for many characters. And his hope that his father, who was a pirate, who Luffy happens to know, has gone off and maybe will someday come back. But the main characteristic that we're seeing is that he is a compulsive liar. Yeah. And so your thoughts on Usopp? Let's go.
Who wants to jump on
it? I think Usopp just wants to be loved. He's missing his dad. His mom is sick, and he makes up these wild stories for attention, yes, but I think he wants people to care about him. And even though his mom does care, she's in bed, she's bedridden, she can't really fulfill the need that he's wanting. And his dad is gone, and he has these grand dreams of what his dad does. And so he makes up these grand delusions of what his life is like, just for seeking that love and that fulfillment. And it makes me feel sad for him. And I love that Kaya sort of allows him to divulge these dreams that he has, these goals, these adventures that he's taken, and she believes him. And that's what he needs. And that's why, there's such a nice little bond between them.
Yeah, there really is. And I like that you mentioned Kaya in relation to his character, because I don't know if I picked up on it, and I don't even know if they did it in the anime per se, but in the closing scene of this episode, she says she wants him to come back and tell her the real tales of Captain Usopp, which makes it clear she's been in on it the whole time.
Mhm.
And just the subtlety with which they didn't heavy hand that she's helping him. They didn't heavy hand that throughout the episode. They didn't heavy hand it in the anime. And the fact that they just let it have one brief moment at the end is just very sophisticated, very adult.
Mhm.
And I very much appreciated that gentle way of knowing, no, she's been helping him too. I very much appreciated that.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I like about Usopp is that he like Luffy is everything that Usopp wants to be. So, but that doesn't like let Usopp to not like Luffy. So, like sometimes when in general, when something like this happens, you get jealous, you get like not like this person, or you probably become a villain. Like some other anime does it like that. But what I like about Usopp is that like he didn't took it too hard, because like Luffy knew his father. Usopp didn't even know his father, but Luffy knew him. Luffy had a totally different picture about Usopp's father than Usopp had. But at the same time, I feel like Usopp still thinks Luffy as a friend, and he wants to be like him, kind of like he gets inspired by Luffy. And I think the way Usopp grew up, like the background he had, that is, I think, a very brave thing to be. Like he is growing, he is becoming more mature, as we see with just like being with Luffy and the whole crew. So that part of me, because I was not a fan of Usopp at first in the anime, but I slowly started like love him, slowly started like understand him, and that part of me like likes him very much. That like even though he went through so much hardship, he still wants to be a better person. He is a compulsive liar, but he's still like, that's part of him, but he still does the good thing, does the thing that's good for the crew.
Right. And Luffy says that, you look out for your friends, and that's the kind of person that I want on my crew. And it's true. He is a coward. He's a compulsive liar, but he's also compassionate and cares about his friends. I didn't mean for all of those to start with a C. But my conclusion is that, he has a heart of gold and a liar's tongue. But it sort of goes back to what we were talking about with Luffy, and Kristen and I were discussing the episodes, and you said something that really stuck with me, that Luffy meets people where they are. Yep. And Maisha, you were sort of talking about their relationship, and like when he said, I know your father, and the way that their dynamic works, they could be adversaries immediately, but instead, they have this friendly rivalry competition of who's the captain. But Kristen, I wanted you to talk a little bit about like how Luffy does that. Like,
so there's this one specific moment where they're in the house, they're about to eat dinner, they're getting all their hors d'oeuvres, and they taste something, and Luffy's like, oh, this is amazing. And Usopp says, oh, you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of when I was out on the sea and I slayed a dragon, and I roasted that dragon over a fire, and then I ate the whole thing by myself. Have you ever had dragon? And Luffy says, no. Instead of being like, this is absolutely crazy. Nobody roasted. You didn't eat a whole dragon by yourself, first of all. Second of all, dragons, I don't think they exist in this world, but, maybe they do. If they do, they're definitely elusive. But, but he just says, oh, no, I haven't.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, he just says no. Like, he just totally meets him where he is. He says, yes, this is in your world right now. Dragons exist, and I'm right there with you, buddy. And I think that's really beautiful. Maybe a little enabling, but also really really lovely.
Right. Well, I like it at the end when Luffy invites Usopp onto the Going Merry, and Zorro says, just get on already. And what I love about that is they know he tells tall tales. And, we've all perhaps friends who are a bit hyperbolic in their descriptions of life in the world, and it can turn into an endearment, right? It can be their way of being with us, and you come to expect it, and it can get annoying, but so can friends. So I just, as you said, meets him where he is, finds a way. I mean, Luffy's annoying as hell, and as the show goes on, they're going to comment on just how annoying he is more and more. But that's also an indication of the depth of their friendship, right? And that's something I just really appreciate about this storytelling and the way they're writing the characters. It's like they're not confessing their friendship, love of each other every moment. And it's like, no, you're an idiot and I still love you, right? Because of that authenticity of protecting your friends and getting to the root of it, and as opposed to all these conscious confessions and blah, 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 blah that we often see. So I love what you guys said about meeting him where he is.
Yeah. And I think that all of the characters that we're meeting have these very overt flaws that are not hidden, that you don't have to discover as you go along. You know, Luffy is obnoxious and a little airheaded, and Zoro's this prickly character with a chip on his shoulder and a dark past and edgy. He's an edgelord. And Nami, you know, also with a dark past, but doesn't trust anyone and is deceitful in a different way than Usopp, who is boastful and not necessarily arrogant, but you know, likes to blow himself up. But they're very obvious traits, you know.
Yeah.
And unless there's anything else about Usopp, I feel like this is a good segue to talk about Kuro, who is a different.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
When we were talking last episode, I said one thing I love about One Piece is that I feel like I'm in on it. Mm-hmm. And what we see is all these people are in on each other, right? Mm-hmm. They don't know Nami yet. They're not totally in on Nami, and that'll come, right? Mm-hmm. But they're in on each other. And I think that's a theme of the show in the anime, is getting in on each other by meeting each other where we are and having each other's backs. I mean, on the one hand, it's found family. We've seen that 1,000 times. On the other hand, this is prickly found family. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate that take on it.
Yeah.
I just want to add one last thing about Usopp, is that, like, I don't know, like, probably it's about the actor or probably it's the script, but Usopp in live action is way more likable than Usopp in anime to me. Like, I don't know why, but I really liked the Usopp, the actor Jacob Gibson, who played Usopp so well. And I think the way he was, like, you know, even when he was like telling the lies, he was just trying to explain it, like he's telling a story. He's a storyteller. So it didn't feel like annoying to me. It felt like, oh my God, he's being funny. It was funny to me. It was like more, how do I say it? It's like more adorable, I guess. So I don't know. Probably it's the actor, probably it's the script. I don't know, but this is what I felt like.
And I feel like I picked up on that childlike quality as well.
Yeah.
But I might push back a little bit in that if we are comparing performances, and just as an actor, I'm going to say this and shut up about it. I feel like his portrayals when he's telling the stories, and Kristen, you and I talked about this too.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
Oh, and I'm going to, because we're going to have a little bit of conflict on the ship.
Who's going to swab the deck?
His stories are animated and amusing and childlike. I still think maybe there's a little bit of growing that needs to happen to get to the genuine portrayal of emotions, things that you can't control, things that are true and authentic, that overcome you, as opposed to the things you manufacture and show. And I don't know if that was a conscious choice, but it works for the character because he's not ready yet to confront the reality of his life.
Well, I do think that's a theme even in the anime of don't pull out your sword unless you're willing to risk your life. And I think it's that being willing to go to be in the Grand Line and then confront it as it is and push through in the name of getting your dream is kind of the other end of the story for me. So it's first getting in on who you are, getting in on who other people are. And then what are you willing to do to become who you want to be? And Usopp, as you said, he's not there yet. And that's going to come. I did want to quickly comment on Maisha's comment about the acting, because what I noticed, particularly, we'll talk about this when we talk about Zorro, and we talk about the scene where Zorro accepts the girl's blade from the father. This is all very toned down. I mean, I remember watching the Zorro accepting the sword scene and committing himself to being the greatest sword fighter ever in the anime, and it just didn't. The screaming didn't stop. Right there. Just doesn't stop. And Usopp, it's always high amplitude. Blah, 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 blah. So that's all. They've really sort of toned it down. And I think they just get it so right, because how do you decrease the amplitude, not destroy the signal, and still keep it a coherent wavelength? I don't mean to go physicist, but I'm saying they did that. Tone it down the amplitude, get everybody on the same wavelength. And again, that's probably because the author of the manga was in the room. But yeah,
I think there's also, sorry, I think there's also a subtle art to camp, and they do it very well.
Yes.
You know, there's farcical and things like that, but there's a very subtle art that's happening here, and they do it very well, where it is completely out of this world and outrageous, their world, but it's still grounded and real to them. And so that's why we can empathize with them. That's why it doesn't seem like you know, I haven't watched the anime, so I can't talk to that, but I can't speak to that. But I feel like in the live action, what this particular live action, which a lot of them miss so much, is that it is so grounded. It's so real to the world, and that's why we can actually sit and enjoy it.
And in the anime, the anime style and the voice acting style, they keep that narrative grounded in that genre. They have to do the overtop acting. Sometimes they're doing 12 frames a second, which is, you know, ching, 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 not what you're used to watching. If you're going to say that good animation means, you know, Disney 32 frames a second or whatever. So I'm just, I guess the word's really impressed and kind of shocked, to be honest, that they actually got the transition that well. Because usually, you know, we're not going to talk about other shows by name, but they just don't capture the anime vibe and put it well in live action. First of all, people's bodies move gradually. In anime, people's bodies move tick, 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 but it grounds it and it all works. So yeah, I guess I'm really excited. They had to tone down the amplitude in order to get it, as you said, Kristen, grounded in this medium of actual bodies moving in space and time instead of animation just jumping all over the place. Which I love, by the way.
So I think at this point, maybe I'll let you guys choose your own adventure. We can go the Kuro route and talk about a true deceptive person, or we can go the Zorro route and talk about his the character that we saw, and you brought him up, Scott, with accepting the sword and his relationship with Kuina and how that makes him who he is. So you tell me.
I'm fine with talking about Zorro right now.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
I love this character. I mean, there isn't really a character in this show I don't love. And when we were talking about Usopp's backstory, this show, I've not read the manga. The anime just does the best backstories, and they all make you care. All these backstories make you care, and the things that came up in the Zorro backstory about training with the daughter of his sensei and not being able to defeat her, and the bittersweet realization in her life that would inevitably change as a function of genetics, that's heartbreaking. And the fact that he recognizes her situation, she affords him a moment of growth, and then they both agree to help each other become the best swords person in the world. Pretty friggin' adult, you know. And it was adult when it played out in the anime. It's adult when it plays out in live action, and we may have a hard time in contemporary culture believing that someone can make a decision when they're 13 that would compel them for the rest of their life. I think those people still exist. I think there are people that are driven, that do not stop and make weird claims like, I'm going to be the best, blah, 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 ever. Man, but that's almost what it takes to get onto and through the Grand Line. I mean, you
I
just
mean,
have nerves
I,
of steel, man.
those people actually definitely still exist. I, at 2 years old, told my parents I was going to move to New York City and become an actor, and
Exactly.
that's what I did with my life for most of my life. And
Yeah.
so
and
they do
yeah.
still exist.
Yeah.
May I say that in Japan, being the age 12, 13, 14, that is the age when you decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And
Mhm.
that's not even from the individual, that's societal. Like you should know by then which
Mm.
schools you are looking at to go into, for what career you're going to have, for what annual salary you're going to make,
Right.
for what area of what city of what prefecture you're going to live in, and what
Mhm.
life you're going to have. That is imposed upon a Japanese teenager. So
Yeah.
so yeah, to say that 13-year-olds can't make decisions, that's preposterous.
And that's,
Now, should
Right.
they? I don't know. But
I
will
don't think
they?
it's also, sorry, I don't mean to
Go ahead.
interrupt. It's not unique also to Japan. I know, and I had a roommate once who was Scandinavian, and in
Yeah.
Scandinavian countries, you make a decision around eighth grade, and you decide you go to vocational
Yeah.
schools, and so that's it is definitely normal throughout the world. I
Yeah. And
think in the
it's
United
also
States, it's a little different, but yeah.
that's also one of the reasons that those cultural systems can sustain socially funded education systems,
Hmm. Yeah.
because in the United States we live it a little more capitalistically oriented. Everybody has a chance to do it at any time as long as you're willing to pay for it, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, I totally agree. Um, the institutionalization of 13-year-old decision making, that
Excuse me.
totally get I totally get that. That's not kind of the energy I get off of Zorro,
Mm,
and not the energy I get off of any of these characters.
mm,
What I'm getting from them is a little more about what Kristen said about being, a certain age and saying I'm going to New York and I'm going to make it. And so yes, everybody here in this crew lives that kind of life, right? That's why we're all doing One Piece and going to the Grand Line. Um, and sometimes, yeah. All I can say is what I love about the show, and is that it stays true to the cost of living that life. It doesn't make that sentimental. They have to keep holding each other up in the bad times, and the found family is what gets you through it. So yeah, I very much dig. It's very easy to get overly sentimental in those
Hmm.
spaces, and then that just obfuscates the work and the pain that goes on with making it happen. So I appreciate that.
mhm.
Sticking to it.
Speaking of sentimentality,
Yeah,
I'd like to talk about the Kuina and Zoro moment where they're
yeah,
talking about how, a
yeah.
girl can beat a boy and a woman can't beat a man. And
Mm,
that moment sort of made me really emotional because
mm,
I'm aging myself here, but I am a child
yeah,
of the 80s. I'm a grandma millennial. I was born in 1982. And so, there were many times where you're told as a young woman in that time period where you can't do things a man can do.
right,
And that's just the way it is. And I was very fortunate that I grew up with a dad who
right,
was the Zorro character and said, that's crap. That's
right.
absolute crap. No, like you can do whatever you want to do. You're going to educate yourself.
Yeah,
You're going to stand up for yourself. And he sort of created a monster
yeah.
in that with me, but don't laugh, Rio.
Someone more than capable of handling themselves in the Grand Line, dare I say, right?
But yes, exactly. And so that moment was so touching to me,
Yeah,
that it was a young boy saying it to a
yeah,
young woman. It was
yeah.
really really lovely, and I think it's a great moment for young people now too.
Yeah, I love how that's cutting through all that cultural 13-year-old decision making and letting it be two human beings who want to be better, creating a space for each to get to get better. That's fantastic.
And this is something that I think I brought up in our first episode, that, through manga, there were things that I discovered that I didn't realize I could or didn't know about the world, about myself, about anything, that I learned through these stories, that, oh, maybe I did think that, or maybe I did think there was gender inequality, and maybe that doesn't matter. If you're both trying to be the best at what you're going to do, then you continue to do that. And then I learned that you can cut that short tragically with the death of the character that you just started to like. But there is a little bit more mystery with that character and that plot line specifically that maybe we'll find out later on in the story. Yeah. More about Zorro.
Well, I just want to keep talking about this idea of girls, women doing what you want. As a father of two young women, I saw it as my job to encourage them to enter the Grand Line and help them become tough enough to deal with it. I didn't want to say, you're going to be this. I didn't want to say things. If you want it, all you got to do is this and you're going to get it, because there's so many things between you and what you want, that telling them they're going to get it, Disneyfying what it means to be in the Grand Line is very dangerous for people, because at a young age, they just take it in. And then 10 years later, they think you're judging them because they haven't done that. So it was very important that they learn the Kung Fu of going after what they want, learn how to deal with not getting it. And I told them that I'm the one here to teach you. So it wasn't always a sentimental thing. It was, there were times when I had to be the world. And so what I'm saying is, yes, what I tried to train my daughters, as well as anyone who I mentor, Grand Line's a beast, and if you want something out of it, you got to learn to deal with the Grand Line as it is. That means you got to be tough. You need to learn how it is. You can tell it how it should be, and at the same time, if you don't address how it is as you do that, it's going to run you over. So you got to be able to figure out the degrees of freedom you're in, and then figure out, how to get it. So I'm more than willing to have a conversation about whether or not that was the right way to do it. But having lived the life I've lived, it's just being scrappy, man. You've got to be scrappy and maybe have some skills, and you got to believe in yourself, and you just got to keep moving, and you got to learn what do I do next when it didn't work? And that doesn't mean plan B. It means still moving towards plan A. But what do I do now? For example, that I didn't get that gig. That paper was rejected. I didn't get that. How do I what do I, so I'm babbling right now, but I love the man.
You're speaking on how to be adaptable and how to grow through these moments and accept change, and know that change is good, and that when things don't work out, sometimes it's for the better. Because you become a stronger, more compassionate person. That's where you grow. You grow in the icky. You grow in the mud.
Well said. Okay, so that's the tagline for the episode. You grow in the icky.
You grow in the icky.
Well, I'm not to jump to the next character.
Yeah.
But the point for me of Kuro for this episode is that's someone who didn't get what they want and didn't adapt. Their way to adapt was to take care, was to assault the vulnerable. And that's that. So Udo knows what he's doing. He knows he's putting all these people up against Luffy to try to show all these different things about what it means to try to live in the Grand Line. And I love it.
And that's precisely right in that what Kuro did, and he talks about this to Luffy in their standoff, like, do you really want to be the king of the pirates? I never failed a raid. I did everything right. And everyone is out every night to slit your throat. Is that what you want? They couldn't hack it.
Okay,
so what did
he do? I think that was the reel for this episode. Well done, man.
And what did he do? He went into hiding.
Yes.
The rumor went around that he was killed, and then he hid and took advantage of this rich family.
Yeah.
Most likely, it's implied that he killed Kaya's parents.
Yeah.
It might even be explicitly said, and then waited until she came of age so that he could easily just take on the wealth,
Right.
and live a quietly sinister life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the opposite of these characters that we're looking at. That he didn't grow in the Iki. He was born in the Iki, but he did not come out of the Iki.
He couldn't adapt, and he left.
And I feel like Zorro in the Well is sort of an allegory. It's a very visual
Zorro
metaphor.
in the Well.
Zorro in the Well, the Zorro in the Well allegory.
That's a song,
right? And we see it. It's literally, it's being shown to you. He tries this thing, it doesn't work. He tries climbing, it doesn't work. He falls.
Yeah.
He climbs again. It takes a couple times before he achieves, plan A.
And coupling that with the telling of his backstory,
Mm-hmm.
really was,
Right.
I'm just going to say, efficient storytelling. They didn't tell two separate stories. They told one at the same time, which tied all of them. I feel the contemporary Zorro as more as a future embodiment of the early Zorro, more so now than perhaps I did in the anime. And that was just a brilliant writing choices. Something else we might talk about a little more, because some of the writing choices they made in these two episodes, and all four of them so far, are just brilliant. How do we make it efficient and actually make it efficient and maybe say a little better? Anime fans, I'm sorry, but
I think I read somewhere that there were at least 10 writers on this season so far, and keep hiring human writers because they do good jobs.
Well,
yes, please.
Well said.
Absolutely.
But back to Kuro and his crew. One other thing that I do want to mention is
please.
We've talked about sort of costume design before and the stupidity of it. I just love how dumb they are.
It's so dumb.
Kuro and Bucci and Sham, which, by the way, all of those are names of types of cats in Japan. Kuroneko are black cats, Sham cats, and even Kurahadoru, I think, is a pronunciation of ragdoll. Ragdoru. So they're it's all there already. Oda loves puns in his writing.
Love that.
So they're all after cats, and if you look closely, they all have little curly things in their costumes. Kuro has a curly collar, and I mean, Sham looks like a character from Junji Ito. All the Uzumaki and exactly. It's consistent. The mask that kind of looks like Catwoman from the.
Oh my god, it's so funny. It's so funny.
It is.
Oh man,
so dumb.
Go ahead, Kristen.
No, I was just gonna touch on the actor for Kuro. When I first watched it, I didn't know who Kuro was, so I didn't watch the anime. I had no idea that he would be who he became. I didn't know about the pseudo Wolverine fingers. I didn't know about this, and so as I was watching it, he kept putting his glasses up, and I thought to myself, that's what gets you cast. It's that weird thing that you do in the audition. I did. I did. I was like, that's what, and maybe that wasn't written in for him to do. Maybe that was the actor's choice. I don't know, but it was so interesting and specific, and it made him so much more of a character for me. Like just that little tiny specificity really, really honed in who he was. And then when it came out that, this is why he's doing that, I was like, oh, this is fabulous. I love this. I love it. Now it all ties together. It wasn't just a weird quirk. So I don't know. That was.
And this is kind of why I was really excited, Kristen, that you were coming on to the crew, because it's these discoveries that I had 2 decades ago that you get to have now. Apparently, the Czech Republic never had any localization of the manga or anime, so this is the first adaptation that they will ever see of One Piece in Czech. So right now you are Czech and you are experiencing it for the first
There you
time,
go.
and it's really exciting to watch.
So
Because you
all
get to
you
see
Czech
those things.
viewers out there, write in and
Yes,
tell us
yeah.
about your experiences. I want to go back to the idea, the costumes and the
Yeah.
stupidness.
Mhm.
Because as I watch this more and more, and it's when I'm watching the anime and I'm sitting there crying, right? I'm like, what the hell? So what I think they've accomplished so well is this: when you try to make people cry and you try to do a period piece, or you try to make sure that the set is consistent with the time, or so that everything is about the actors and
Mhm.
it puts a lot of pressure on the scenery. It and its scenery actually can become a distraction. It has to work perfectly. But by making the scenery this background of lunacy, right? By making the scenery fantastical, it actually, I think, foregrounds the relationships even more. I'm not going to say it makes it easier for them to come through, but I will say that uh, it almost makes it feel richer. I mean, just because you've got this context that contrasts the authenticity, the intensity of the relationship. So I can't put words to it well right now. If the lunacy is providing a rich contrast that makes the relationships feel richer, I don't know. But it just seems like it's being used as a way to make the relationships come through clearer.
To that, I would say that I actually think they are creating more believability, verisimilitude in the world by making it so. By us seeing that this is not regular.
Yeah.
Like the interior of Kaya's mansion, there's a scene, the dinner scene, all of the walls and windows are covered with plates. It's absurd.
Yeah.
The hallways, every inch is covered with just decoration. The closet with the
Maximalism.
clothes, like everywhere. Yes. And
my aesthetic.
and I'm like, can we have some empty space to just be empty space? But back to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
What it does, I think, is it, just like you were saying with a historical piece that's trying to be more accurate, historically speaking, so that you can focus on the actors, it's the same thing. It's actually being accurate to the world, to the type of story that we're telling, so that it doesn't stand out. If for a second you're like, oh, that ship is an accurate sloop, then you're not watching the show. But if you're like, that's a goofy ship, cool, we're watching a goofy show, but I'm supposed to be watching these characters that are doing things, then you're focused on that because the other things aren't distracting. Now, it is fascinating and fun to watch, and I highly recommend doing it, watching the scenery, but do it on your second watch, because if you notice it on the first watch, then it probably isn't correct,
Right.
And so I think that's what you're saying, is that it's believable because everything is as weird as it's supposed to be, as opposed to as accurate as anything in the real world. Because
if I use a phrase like internally coherent, that's what I would say.
Yeah.
And that rich internal coherence just allows the characters to even be a wee tad goofy, but the relationships just shine through, and you're crying at all the right moments. You're excited at all the right moments. And just, for example, I just don't know that either version of Willy Wonka ever quite accomplished that same strength of character. I mean, I love Gene Wilder's Willy Wonka, not a big fan of the second one, but it's the same kind of thing where you have this fantastical space, you have Oompa Loompas, you have these fantastical characters. And nonetheless, I still don't know that I got the same rich character contrast with the background in Willy Wonka. And I'm not dissing Willy Wonka. What I'm saying is, because I love Willy Wonka, Gene Wilder, thank you, is that this is just perfect. Everything is contrasting everything else in a very coherent way. And I can see myself watching this once a year with no problem.
Sure.
Just because it's a fun ride and it's really, really smart. Yeah.
And I hope that we do have to do that and not rush. I don't need season 2 in 2024 if it needs to take longer.
Yep.
Netflix, if Mr. Netflix, if you're watching, we can wait. We can wait.
Yeah,
all right,
exactly.
let's do it right.
I mean, Game of Thrones had how many months in between each time? Years.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
yeah, obviously this is not Game of Thrones, but but
Well,
still,
I hope
we want it done. We want it done right. We want it done right.
We want a good final season when that comes around. Sorry about that, but
I don't know. I didn't watch it.
We're all alive.
I tried 7 times to watch it and couldn't get into it. So
the final season is still very difficult to handle.
I hear it's still a raw nerve.
Some of the best women characters ever. And I'll say it again. A woman has a dragon, has a moment of reflection, and blows up the city. Okay, so they're trying to tell me once again that women are hysterical. Sorry. I mean, it's a horrible trope. Second of all, they're at the final resolution of the show.
Oh, boy.
And you've got the King's Landing table, whatever it's called. You've got all these men of power sitting around with a woman, Brienne of Tarth, the biggest person in the room, the most honorable person in the room, and they start telling dick jokes. It's horrible. I'm sorry.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I did I wrote ahead of crew I was writing it to at the time. I said, we need better stories, y'all. This cannot, this bad storytelling cannot stand. Okay, I'll stop.
I'm going to steer this ship back. Yep.
Anyway.
Before I contribute and take us down that path, we're going to steer back to Kuro and the cat crew. Anything else on them? On the kitties before we move to our last item?
Well, when all of you were talking about like how you found like Kuro and the gang like very funny and everything, I found him creepy. I don't know why. He creeped me out. He didn't creep me out in the anime as much as he creeped me out in the live action. Like I was like, Sheer Village arc is like, I didn't think it was as dark in the anime. But in the live action, it was very dark. And I was like, damn, I don't like him. And he gave me, how do I say it, kind of a goosebump when I was watching it. I felt very uncomfortable watching all the scene where Kuro was in it. I think that's a good thing how they did in the live action to like portray him as a bad person, but at the same time, like how real it felt. So yeah, that was like my personal experience with him.
And Zorro called it right away.
Yep.
Right away, which I actually didn't notice first pass. We watched it again today, and I noticed it the second time, and I was like, "Yeah, there he is. He has no sense of direction, but his intuition is good."
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and he's actually been in places that Luffy hasn't. Zorro's got a. We don't know Nami's backstory yet. That'll come. It's clear she's been in places and stuff, but your comment about him being dark, these 2 episodes were heavy.
Really
I mean, I'm
heavy,
glad we're finding things to laugh about because these 2 episodes were very heavy.
They were paced a little bit different than I think the rest of the series too.
Yeah.
And I mean that might partly be owed to different directors. These 2 episodes different than the past 2 and different than the next 2. But I remember reading the manga and thinking specifically that Kuro was very creepy. And the manga does tend to get away with a little bit more, I think, than the anime in terms of being a little bit darker, a little bit grittier. But yeah, I think there was also some cinematography work that worked really well, some light work that made Kuro a lot creepier, a lot of like strange zoom work and framing and angles. So I absolutely agree with you there.
You guys bring up the darkness of this episode. There's something I just want to ask you. And if my kids were 8 and 12, I'd be watching this with them. I'm going to be honest with you. I'd be watching this with them, and there would be cussing going on. There would be people being killed from behind with massive amounts of swords. And, 20 years ago, or I don't know, you guys may think that it's creepy for a dad to watch something with, like this with young kids. And I'm just wondering if making the choice to have it be this show with that level of violence and that level of, cussing in the language, is that a contemporary sensibility? Go ahead.
My father took me to see the Highlander movies in the theater when I was a child. So
Okay, so I mean, we know your father
no.
prepared you for the grand line. Okay, so
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe that was odd, probably, but
well,
I mean,
Shout
no, I
out to
mean
my
that was,
mom for taking me to see Fargo when I was 11.
oh my
yes,
God.
Scars
yes,
for
Kathy.
life. Now,
yes. I mean, again,
that's a little different, but
we're a crew of grand liners. So when I ask,
we've seen some goldfish shit.
yeah, exactly. Well, that to be honest, that may have something to do with why the four of us are here talking now, right? Because we had parents who showed us the grand line in a
Yeah.
cinematographic way. So I guess my question about contemporary sensibilities, I guess, isn't about all of our upbringings, right? But so maybe we're not the best people to answer that question. I mean, I remember showing my daughter Full Metal Alchemist when she was 12, and stopping an episode where they're trying to make the Fuhrer, and it's like, baby, are you sure? Damn, like a body's in the back of what? She goes, Dad, they're the Nazis. Those are the Jewish people that they were hurting. I get it. Okay, we're good. Let's go. But man, my parents would have never watched something like that with me. And if I wanted to watch like Dracula from the 30s, I'd just stay up by myself till 2 a.m. and get onto the TV and watch it. So that's why I'm asking. It's just I love it, and I'm just, I mean, obviously the world loves it because it's like the #1 show out there right now.
Yeah.
Just wanted to ask what you guys thought about it. Current
And I can't speak authoritatively, not being a parent myself, but I would think that in these situations, kind of like you were saying with Game of Thrones, and maybe that's a bad example, but it might be more important to look at the message behind it. What's being shown, what's being told, what's being taught, because there's a certain amount of maybe violence or situations that kids aren't ready for that might be traumatic later on. Fargo wood chipper, but if you're what we're looking at is more of like, what's the message, what is the takeaway, because it's not like us sheltering children from what actually happens in the world is going to be helpful when they encounter it in the world.
Agreed.
It's going to, like we said, they're gonna be in the icky eventually, but they got to be able to come out of the icky with the right ideas. We got to hand them that straw hat and trust them at a certain point and say, you got the skills. Here are the messages, lessons that I've taught you, some through media, and you saw some of the rough stuff that happens, but you saw that how people, well-adjusted or even maladjusted people, are able to get through it. Look at these examples, follow these ones, don't follow these ones, and I'll see you in Logtown in the Grand Line. Give me my hat back.
I agree completely. I mean, Kristen, it sounds like your father took you to the Grand Line. Rio, your mom took you to the Grand Line. I took my kids there. I used cinema as a way to raise issues, particularly when talking to my daughters when it came to issues of sexuality and controlling your body, and it wasn't me showing them R-rated movies and such. It was just, I wanted to be relevant in that conversation. So I use cinema as a way to talk about things about controlling your own body in a way where if I were to said, hey, let's talk about controlling your body, they would have just wrote, Dad, what the hell? Right. So there's all kinds of great media out there. So instead of looking at it as something you have to protect your kid from, you can look at it as a way to be in those spaces with your kid. Because the thing is, man, kids are watching everything now. They're watching everything now. And if they're not watching it with a parent, someone older, more mature, who loves them, that means that they're interpreting it within the lens of the people they're with, whatever age it might be. And as a parent, you're missing out on an opportunity to be relevant. So instead of being a gatekeeper, man, because if you
that's so good. That's so good.
You just make yourself irrelevant, and they don't come to you later. And because you haven't been willing to be there. Oh, I'm blathering on and on, but this show is
but that's good stuff. That's such good stuff.
Yeah.
It is.
So I think that kind of brings us to the last part, which I want to talk about the ship. But I think the way that we introduce the ship is through one of the first deaths that I think Luffy that happens around Luffy's sphere, you know. It is sort of an innocent bystander. It is perpetrated by the villain, but it's the death of an innocent in the course of Luffy becoming the king of the pirates, right? And how is it resolved? He, you know, the ship that he chose even before any of this happened is named after the attorney, the sheep attorney Mary that died in the course of the story in the couple episodes. I thought that was an interesting way to sort of, you know, go through that, get through that trauma, I guess, and not really have to deal with Luffy taking it upon himself to be like, the blood of Mary is on my hands. That's not Luffy's brand. That's not where we are in the story. We don't have time for that. We move on. We name the ship after him, and we live on with his legacy. We enjoy what he gave us, and we move forward. You know,
very Miyazaki like.
Yeah, true.
No, it's no longer the forest spirit's forest. You know, it's never going to be that way again. Well, he's trying to tell us to live, right? And it's that wry smile he gave Kobe when Kobe told him he wasn't coming. And he said, oh, and you see that smile slowly because he's sad. Is it going to become a frown? Is it going to become a smile? It slowly becomes a wry smile because he is sad, but he turns it into opportunity moving forward. And I'm going to admit a bit of stupid right now. I've watched the anime. I've watched the series before. I'm in my second or third time. And I didn't connect Mary being named after Mary. I will admit I must have been looking at the background this time, right? And I didn't get the relationship. But
oh my gosh.
So discovery comes with adventure.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yep. Excellent. Yeah.
I mean,
you've all just lost faith in the pseudo captain. Dude, it was pretty heavy-handed.
You don't have to know
sometimes
everything.
you can't see past your own nose. Like these things happen sometimes, you know, it just happens.
But now you know.
Ahead.
That's it.
Well, now you know.
You know that I have my vulnerabilities. What I love about him saying this ship is going Mary and carrying, and by the way, introducing that vibe publicly to everyone, right? It's not unlike Zorro accepting the sword with infusing it with a sort of commie commitment to becoming the best swords person ever, right? And this idea of labeling things as something psychological is something we might look as bizarre in the Western world, but I don't think it's quite, it's not experience. I don't think it's experienced that way in other cultures that don't have object spirit divides. And I have all kinds of totems in my house. I'm not going to lie. I take all kinds of things and I don't like do a ritual, but this is from this event. This is from this event. And I want those things in my life because they help me stabilize when I'm in the Grand Line and I'm not feeling like I know what I'm doing. Right? So I love this idea of surrounding yourself with a fullness, richness, and infusing objects and events with those feelings. Because, man, you're going to go on the Grand Line, guys. You're going to have bad days full of self-doubt, bad failures. Woo, and you're going to have to find something to get you back up. So I love, now their home is, memory of Mary. I love it. Now that I understand it.
Kristen knows.
And I mean, he was the only advocate. He was the only advocate for Kaya.
Yes.
Really. And so it's very fitting.
Yeah.
Yep. I name things around my house. Statues.
Do you really?
Carpets,
plants,
rugs, rather plants, definitely. For sure.
Now, can I ask you a personal question about that?
You may.
So you're Japanese American. So are you naming things in your house with a sort of Japanese commie sensibility, not consciously, just something you picked up growing up? And you can say, Scott, shut up, edit this out of the video. It's none of your business.
No, it actually was sort of where I think our conversation was going to go from here. I don't know that necessarily. Well, here's what I think then about that is that I think I do approach inanimate objects um, the approach of one with another sense of spirit, I guess, like communing with an object. Even though it is an object, it holds spirit. It has personality. I mean, plants are almost an exception because they are creatures. You know, they are alive. But even inanimate objects, I think that an object that appears in front of us has an effect on us, like a person has an effect on us. It has a personality. It's just sort of stuck in time and space as an inanimate object. Why wouldn't I name that if I'm going to be interacting with it?
Okay, so that's a mic drop. That is our reel for the week, or at least reel 2 or 3, because that was brilliant. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
And what I think that connects to now is that in Japan, it's common to name very fine swords, for example.
Yes.
In shipwriting, you name ships. I think this is sort of along the same lines, and what you'll see throughout the series and this manga and a lot of other things, I think, in Japanese media, is that things have names, things have value, things have character, things have meaning. So in the case of Zorro, the Wado Ichimonji is his first sword, right? Primary sword. What we're going to find out throughout the story, if they follow the anime and the manga storylines, is that he gains different swords with different names and different personalities, different characteristics. Now, what's fun about manga is that they can actually have supernatural powers, right?
Yeah.
And so each sword has a characteristic. The ship, same thing. Yep. You know, there is supposed to be another ship after the Going Merry. I won't spoil anything, but like that's going to be another thing. And it's sort of like losing a crew member to get a new ship. They even say like a ship isn't just a ship; it's also a home.
Yes,
it's a member of our crew, and I think that's exactly it. And that's what we're saying is that these objects, you'll see each of the characters sort of continue to gain these sort of objects that have names, that have functions, that have character. You know, Nami will have whatever navigational doodads and obviously Zorro's swords and so on. I think it's very cool to see what objects mean in the story.
It's sort of related to.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. No, please go ahead. Sorry.
It kind of relates to like Luffy's relation to his hat too. Like it is also an like inanimate object that Luffy is like very attached to it, and he will not let it go in any situation. And it's the same with Mary. Like when we first introduced with Mary, they kind of create a bond with it. And as time passes, it kind of grows stronger. And I agree with Rio. I'm not gonna spoil. But like, the next ship that comes and what happens with Going Merry and stuff, it kind of makes it more significant to us, to the viewers. And also I want to point out, like in the live action, it looked amazing, the ship.
Yes.
I saw a lot of clips in the TikTok and like YouTube on like when they were like making it. And it was just so beautiful. And I was really happy with that one. I'm like, okay, you put effort in it.
Yeah. If you're gonna do Fantastico, go over the top and do Fantastico well, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to nerd out for a moment here on little Western intellectual history, because 20th century American intellectual history was committed to the idea that it's only indigenous people that believe things like that we tend to label spirit, vitality, exist in non-biological systems, right? And it was immature to actually grant those kind of qualities to things that weren't what we call dead, right? And it's actually that disconnect, that there's a world of meaning and there's a world of non-meaning, that has led Western philosophy and Western intelligentsia into such disarray that people will say things like, you don't have a conscious will, there is no meaning, just nihilist kind of stuff that comes around from labeling the very things we've been talking about for 10, 15 minutes as immature and intellectually unsophisticated. And the brutal irony is it's only 20% of the world that lives thinking that that's immature. and that's the United States and England. And those are the very two cultures that have been able to, with their immature view of the other, been able to exploit other cultures in ways that may not have happened through other. I'm not saying Christianity makes people evil. I'm not saying pantheism is the best. But what I'm saying is I love this conversation because it's precisely what I write about. How do we let rocks be meaningful, right, in American intelligentsia? Because we're so certain that it isn't. And so I got total nerd moment side note, but it had to come out.
No, you speak to something that's very interesting as well, because think about the, very Western way of thinking. We don't put any sort of thought into inanimate objects except for weapons. And those are the things that matter to us. And those have spirituality.
Okay.
Those are the things that matter. And, not to get too crazy here, but
well, feel free to say what's
they are the reason why the United States and Britain have conquered and colonized the world.
Yeah.
And made their thought, their view, normal.
The mature one.
Whereas, yes, the mature one.
I mean, it's okay. I don't mind this side note at all. And people can.
You don't have to keep it in. I just
No,
that was something
it.
that came to me while we were sitting there, and you said that.
So look, we have steered into the real heart of the Grand Line, right? I mean, this is what I didn't want. I lost it now. This I'll just let it. I may come back to it later, but. Yeah. This is One Piece. This is a Grand Line. Oh, please do, and I'll stop thinking out loud.
So you were talking about like inanimate objects and how one person gives a meaning to it, and in difference between Western and Eastern culture and stuff. So I grew up in a South Asian country, and I am South Asian, although I don't come from a Hindu family, but like I grew up in Bangladesh, and it had a lot of like Hindu culture in it. Like it's kind of like integrated society. It's a multicultural society. So I saw people, like I saw my friends and like people from that religion. They are used to like, praying in front of like a statue. Like they have whenever they have like religious festivities, their main theme is to like praying in front of a statue, like be it Durga or be it Kali or Ram from Ramayana, or Saraswati, and like different statues. And so I think it's a very common thing in like South Asia, at least, to like give meaning to inanimate objects and to like treat them as if they have a soul. I mean, that might be like kind of like impractical or maybe non-scientific in a sense, in a very westernized like view, but it is what I think. So in One Piece, I think that also came true, like the way Oda wrote Going Merry, and it kind of like he tried to give meaning to the ship. And I don't want to spoil, but I'm just gonna say that Oda made me cry over a ship. And I never knew it's possible, but I cried.
That's fantastic.
So bad.
Well,
that's the third tagline. He made me cry over ship. Yeah.
Let me bring us to shore, make landfall here with the fact that if you think about it, Oda had an idea. He had a pen, he had a paper. Even if you don't believe that a pen has a spirit, paper has a spirit, Oda does. What did he do? He transferred his spirit to a piece of paper with ink. And from that, ideas were spread, by an inanimate object to another person. That idea traveled from his hand to paper, to the magazine, to the convenience store, to me, 10-year-old Rio, reading it, standing there, feeling real feelings, spirit transferred from him to me, to hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of others, which brings us here now, watching actual people reenacting the stories that came from inanimate objects and his mind. And now we are meta talking about it from another perspective, from a third person perspective of another thing that was created from objects.
It's like we're in a matrix.
Yes, we're on the matrix.
Exactly.
And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful matrix.
Well, all that stuff that you were calling spirit, a contemporary academic would call information.
Sure, yeah.
the problem with calling it information is it makes it different than the object. So an object is something that can carry information, but an object itself isn't information. And that's why the meaning object partitioning, that's how it works, because we don't believe that objects have meaning. Another way to say everything you said is just to use like the word you use, spirit. Another way to say it is transform. The transformations of the pen transform the paper, transform the blah, 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 blah. And when we use words like transform, we don't get rid of meaning at any point. We don't get rid of aboutness at any point, which is, by the way, why non-Western cultures are able to, members of non-Western cultures are actually able to experience themselves as part of everything. And instead of going into science and letting that lead you to nihilism, which what Western culture did, Japan has no problem with science, man. India has no problem with science. And they don't have any of our nihilist problems, right? They don't have any of the nihilist despair. They're doing their Grand Line thing. And so, yeah. I'll say one more thing and shut up. But y'all, it makes sense then that if you're going to take the spirit out of reality and put it in a human mind thing, that the best way to get people to believe it is make things as simple as possible. And you do that with words like one God, one land, one king. And you keep everything non-poly. You go mono on the entire reality. And that's the mono. Saying one land, one God, one king is precisely what lets you close yourself off to all the suffering that way of believing generates. Now, I'm not saying no one suffers in China or Japan. I'm not trying to say that. I do think that if we were to be a little more aware of the fact that a lot of what we're doing is a function of our own belief system that we don't even know we're living in. All right, Scott stops.
That's all right.
I mean, we could talk about this for hours and hours.
We'll leave some material for next time, I think. But what I do kind of want to leave us with is that, you know, while today we focused on Usopp and Zorro and Kuro and the Going Merry, meanwhile we are still seeing the story of Kobe and Garp and Helmeppo, as well as Buggy and Arlong and obviously Nami. We'll get there, trust me. The connections are very good and very subtle. You got to look very closely. I mean, obviously they're like, hey, remember Buggy? He's still here. And there's this new character, Arlong. Ooh. But then we're left at the end of episode 4 with the fun cliffhanger.
I love
Grandpa?
Love it.
In
terms of writing efficiency, I think that is probably the most genius stroke of the 8 episodes. Is to bring Garp and Kobe in at the front, and to have you know that Garp is Kobe's grandfather up front, because it lets our emotional resolution happen at episode 8 that wouldn't have happened if they'd follow the anime, and it make Garp so damn interesting.
It's so fun. It adds such a fun layer. It makes me like that moment. I was like, we have to watch the next one. I think it was like probably like 12 o'clock, and I get up at 4:45 every morning, and I was like, we have to watch the next one right now. I was like, I can't go to bed.
And I enable it. Okay.
So we're going to talk about Garp. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I was going to say one more thing about Zorro. That opening scene where he is, it's not in the 3rd and 4th episodes, but is it the 2nd episode maybe? Where
the first one in the bar?
The first episode in the bar. I think I turned to Rio and I was just like, well, he's the freaking coolest person I've ever seen in my life. Like, oh my God, I can't wait to see what happens, because it was just such a brilliant cold open for Zorro.
And I mean, it doesn't hurt that he's sinfully attractive.
I mean, that too, but he's just so cool. Like there's like nothing bothers him, though things do bother him.
We'll get there. In fact,
we get there. We know that things bother him, but he just.
But the thing is, since Clint Eastwood came onto the scene, it's very hard to compete with Cole, right? Paul Newman. But this guy This
He's
Zorro
cool.
has nailed the
Oh.
cool.
And Watanabe.
Yeah,
He has nailed the cool, and he's dropped dead sexy, as I would say were Clint Eastwood and Paul Newman. So there is something
absolutely.
about the sexy cool, and that, but it's not aloof, it's not uncaring. It's something's boiling underneath. You don't know what it is, but you're gonna have to work pretty damn hard to figure out what it is, right? Probably have to gonna go through 3 swords to get there. So
or maybe watch our next episode when we get there.
I love it. All right, then. Fantastic. So have we visited all the islands that we wanted to visit this episode, Rio?
We are leaving the Gecko Islands for our next adventure.
We even checked into a couple of ports we didn't even have on the map.
We went to Funky Bar.
We went to Funky
Bar. Mirabal Island.
Mirabal.
What a cool name drop, Funky Bar. I mean, and you imagine that dude at Funky Bar. What would he be doing?
Yeah.
I love it. That's
Disco's dancing in unison with his 2 crewmates.
Yeah, man. Disco gets a bad rap. I know
people say disco sucks, but you know what?
Disco.
I love disco. I'm gonna come out and say I love disco.
I love disco. All right, then. Any final comments on these 2 episodes? All right, then what I want to do now is I want to give all of you the opportunity to tell everyone where they can find you on social media, and we'll start today with Kristen.
On social media, you can find me on Instagram at Fun-Sized Feral, and then on Instagram and TikTok at Kristen Feral Realtor.
Fantastic.
How about you? Realty things.
I'm sorry about that.
You're fine. You're fine.
I'm trying hard. How about you, Maisha?
I only have one public account, and that's my LinkedIn, and you can find me like Maisha Dasinorthi. That's just shows in my Zoom name, so that's just it. And all of my accounts are mostly private, so I don't know. Yeah.
All right. No, fantastic. That's how it goes. And Dear Navigator Rio.
Yes. You can find my poor attempt at social media posting at Instagram, Threads, Facebook, maybe YouTube, at I Know Rio. Do you know Rio? Because I do not.
Yeah. Well, that reel you dropped this week was pretty fantastic, by the way.
Check it out, I guess. I Know Rio. Instagram.
I'm not going to slap you and say, Rio, you're being stupid. All right. I'm not going to do that.
I'm trying. I'm trying.
You have fantastic skills, and I appreciate it. You can find all episodes of the One Piece Crew on YouTube. Oh, so hold on. I flail my hand. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're back.
Okay. Yeah, I flail my hands about, and then I knock the wire out of my microphone. It's the problem of being a rubber man.
Tie those onto the
arm. All right. You can find all episodes of the One Piece Crew on YouTube at Dark Loops Productions. If you'd like to comment on anything we've said during this episode, please feel to write it right on this YouTube page. We'll read it during our next discussion. Or if you want to write something longer, send an email to darkloopsproductions@gmail.com. And like I said, we'll be sure to read it during our next episode. And like I said last time, because we're in the Grand Line, we cannot promise how we will react. So there it is. From all of us to all of you, big hugs. And remember, into the Grand Line.
Time.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.
When